We're going to record this, but if you want me to, I don't know, blur your face or only to type your question in the chat or anything, just tell me and it's okay. So we are here today with Jennifer Lahl, and Jennifer has made 2 movies about surrogacy in the US. Breeders, a Subclass of Women, Big Fertility, and Exploitation, a movie about the egg selling industry. So actually I heard a lot about surrogacy in the news. I just now, a friend sent me a post from a guy Pines about Asi Azar. He went to the US to bring his 2nd child through surrogacy. She's called Our Surrogate, and her name is not told. And we're also not told where is she from. This is a kind of what interested me the most when we talk about women's choice in surrogacy, like what other options women have. And I think I found Jennifer in one of the surrogacy agencies' websites. It was written that you made movies, and these movies present personal cases and don't represent the industry. So I immediately looked for you and contacted you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. And it's been really fun getting to know you, Shulamit, and your work and your interest in this. You know, we, of course, in the United States have followed the global surrogacy debate. And, you know, Israel, of course, has always been on our radar, especially after the big earthquake in Nepal, when we saw many of the women that were surrogates there stranded and their country devastated. But then the wealthy, affluent gay men from Israel were coming in to get their babies and then leaving the women behind in the rubble. But just so the women who don't know me or Callie, we work for and run an organization based in California called the Center for Bioethics and Culture. And both Callie and I are nurses. Callie is currently practicing as a labor and delivery nurse, and I no longer work in nursing, but I did for many, many years in pediatric nursing. So she and I both are very interested in women's health, as well as women's reproductive health in particular, and then, of course, the health and well-being of children. And because our organization is focused on biotechnology and bioethics, assisted reproduction is certainly a new technology. You know, the ability to make babies through egg donation, sperm donation, surrogacy, designer babies. So we have been working in this space for, probably 15 years. We've also made 2 documentary films on women who sell their eggs and the health complications and risks of that. We've made 1 film on donor conception, so the sort of the perspective of the people that are created through egg donation, surrogacy, sperm donation.
And can you, I think you have a lot of knowledge about the medical side of surrogacy. And I think in Israel, maybe Sarah knows more about it because she actually brought a child through a surrogate, a friend of hers. And she actually wrote very, very honestly about the medical, hard side of it. Mm-hmm. And I think for many people, they don't really, the egg, the sperm, what kind of magic happens there? So if you can explain a little.
What kind of magic happens there?
Why is it risky? Why is it something that's really,
I see. Radically? Yeah, well, sperm donation is not risky, right? That's what we call in low technology, low tech. But egg donation and surrogacy is obviously very high tech. So what is involved is, high dose fertility drugs, especially in the egg donation scenario. She's taking, really high doses because they're trying to stimulate multiple eggs. In the US, egg donors can make 10, 15, 20,000 US dollars. So the couple usually doesn't want 1 egg. They want as many as they can get because we know that most of these cycles fail. The IVF cycles fail.
And what kind of women in Israel? We don't have a lot of egg donors because I don't know. No one wants my eggs.
So it's
what kind of women are approached to be the?
Yeah, it's 2 different women. So if you're looking for eggs or you're looking for a surrogate mother, they're 2 very different profiles. The egg donor is a young girl She doesn't have to be married. She's probably a university student. She's healthy. She doesn't want to walk around university campus pregnant for 9 months, right? Because she's a young single girl. She wants to date. She wants to go to the bars. She wants to work her job. So she wants to go and sell her eggs because she could make in about 2 or 3 weeks, $15,000, right? The profile of the surrogate mother in the United States is she is married most of the time, not always. She has to have had children already, because that's usually a requirement of the agency. They want to know that this woman can carry a pregnancy to term, that she doesn't have complicated pregnancies, and she's less likely to want to keep the child if she's low income and she has her own children. She's not doing surrogacy to have more children. So that's very different profiles, but they both take the fertility drugs. They both have different kinds of risks to their own health, their mental health and their physical health.
And that's very interesting. It's regarding the egg donors, it's like college debt. We don't have it in Israel because it's easier in Israel. It's like college debt. They can't pay their bills.
But it's kind of the eugenics model, if you think about it. If you're going to be buying eggs, you want somebody that's smart, that's pretty, attractive, talented, because you think in your mind that the child will be smart, pretty, intelligent, attractive.
Yeah, I think we see it a lot in Israel. It's apparent that the children that people bring from the US, they look very different from me, at least.
Yeah. They have catalogs. So if you go to the agency, they have books, and you can see the pictures of the girls, and they will say how tall they are, how much they weigh, what their grades are at school. Are they straight A's? Are they thin? You can't be fat and be an egg donor. They want you to be a certain weight.
And is it different if straight or gay couples do it? Because we know that gay men use egg donation because they don't have a woman. But I found out, I didn't know about it, that many straight couples also use egg donation, and then I guess the woman wants an egg that is similar, that will look like her child.
Yeah. Women will use egg donation if they have some problem with their own fertility. So for some reason their eggs are bad. Maybe they're just older. Maybe they don't have they call it ovarian reserve. They don't have a lot of eggs left because they're getting older. They're 35, they're 36, 38, 40. But gay men almost always use one woman's eggs and one woman's womb. They very rarely use the surrogate's egg and her womb. And gay men often will inseminate 2 embryos, one from each of their sperm. So the surrogate carries twins, and one of the babies is the sperm from the first man and the other sperm from the second man, because in their mind, they each get a baby that's connected to them genetically.
I definitely saw very disturbing things in the surrogacy agency's websites. Like you pay $5,000 more and you get twins. You can pay $1,000 more and get a special genetic testing you want to do for your baby. I even saw in Israeli surrogacy agencies that she promises the women will only eat kosher food.
Yeah.
These are women in Ukrainian. I will print screen it.
In California, because we're very focused on health, a lot of times they want the surrogate to be vegan, because they want her to eat very clean and no preservatives. But Callie, who's on the call, she's the host of the podcast you mentioned called Venus Rising. I encourage you all to listen to that. But she had a recent interview with a reproductive fertility doctor in the United Kingdom who spoke about all the add-ons that you were just mentioning. Do you want to have this extra test? Do you want to have this extra test? You want to do all this extra stuff to make sure that the final product, the baby, is just how you want it to be.
Yeah, and I think some of these things are just weird and we can laugh about, but some of them are really risky things. Carrying a twin pregnancy is riskier. Some of the tests are maybe maybe they're good for the child's health, but not for the woman's health. So in the beginning, I laughed when I saw these kind of kosher food, vegan food things, but some of these are real risks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very risky. And, Callie and I did research and interviewed, was it 97, Callie? 97 was the final. We interviewed 97 gestational surrogates in the United States, and we compared their own pregnancies with their own children to their surrogate pregnancy. And we took them through a whole host of questions and then analyzed all the data. And that data has all been, it's before peer reviewed, hoping to be published soon. But we found even controlling for the woman's age and controlling for the number of pregnancies, because we know naturally as women get older and they have more and more children, they're naturally going to have higher risk pregnancies because they're getting older and they've had many pregnancies. But we controlled for those factors of age and number of children. And we found that statistically significantly, their surrogate pregnancies were high risk, whether they had a single, triplets, twins, whatever. Surrogate pregnancies are higher risk pregnancies by nature.
And so there are all the things that we now discussed that happened in the beginning, all the weird contract things you can get. And can you tell us why is the pregnancy itself riskier?
Well, we think, and Callie might want to chime in and add to what I'm about to say, but I think it's because she's pregnant with what we call foreign embryos. So we already know in the medical literature, if a woman is pregnant using donor eggs or donor sperm, she has a higher risk pregnancy because it's not her own genetic material. It's just like if I gave you my kidney, so you might reject it. You have to match it. You have to match it. So you're asking this woman to be pregnant with something that's not her own body. So there was 2 very important studies that came out before our research that showed that because of this, there's almost like an inflammatory reaction. Her body is like rejecting this pregnancy. So she's going to have preeclampsia, gestational hypertension. We see more maternal diabetes. All of that translates into premature birth. Because it's a high-risk pregnancy, the babies are born premature. The babies are born premature and don't survive. So, more fetal loss, fetal death. So we think that's why. We don't know because this is new technology. And we're just sort of now, and we're seeing in the children created through assisted reproduction problems. Callie wrote an article recently on another new study that showed children created through assisted reproduction, regardless of donor eggs or sperm or just the husband and wife's own egg and sperm, these children have higher risk too.
And I want to say that we just don't hear about these things because I do think that people can have a choice. You and I have different opinions about some of these things, especially regarding like the child's rights. But what I found out when I looked in the surrogacy agency's website is that these risks were not even mentioned. Like they say, it's going to be wonderful. There is a documentary about the surrogacy industry in Idaho. So the woman says these women just like to be pregnant. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wondered, do the women even know it's going to be that risky from what you saw, the women you interviewed?
No, they aren't told the studies that I just mentioned. What they're told is that there's the risk similar to your own pregnancy. And any woman knows that pregnancy is not without risk, right? We still have women who die in childbirth. We still have women who die in pregnancy. We still have stillbirth, babies that die in the womb. So they're just basically told that this is just similar to your pregnancies where it's going to be a risk. But they're not told the truth about these extra risks. And they're not told about the aftermath. A lot of women, one of the things we found in our research is that women through their surrogate pregnancies had more postpartum depression than with their own children because they go home from the hospital and they don't have a baby. They go home with empty arms. They're not told that. They're told you're just the babysitter. You're just the oven, baking. It's not your baby. You're on a journey. All the language is very manipulative.
I wonder how we as feminists, from one side, we talk, like in Israel, there was just recently cases of gynecologists that harassed women. So we're so aware of how the medical risks a woman can have and all the bad things that can happen in the medical industry. But when it comes to surrogacy, yeah, it's going to be easy. And also I wanted to ask you about really the doctors involved, because you're saying there is a high-risk pregnancy here that women are not even always aware of. And kind of what about the doctors around them? The doctors in the surrogacy industry, they're private in the United States, right?
In the U.S., yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and most of the time a couple's insurance doesn't cover this. So in the U.S., most of it's available to the wealthy, because this is very expensive. We say that to get a take-home baby, through surrogacy, egg donation, IVF, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, for a baby that comes home with you. So it's very, very expensive. So the doctors, they don't have an incentive to tell you it's risky, right? Because they're making a lot of money off you. And fertility doctors are some of the highest paid physicians in the United States, kind of up there with brain surgeons and heart surgeons. Fertility doctors are it's very lucrative. And the agencies, which are kind of like the middlemen, the brokers, the agencies are finding the women, matching them with the couples, the gay couples, the infertile couples. They make a lot of money. And actually the lowest paid person is oftentimes the surrogate who's, working for 9 straight months carrying a pregnancy.
Hi, Hannah. Hannah just joined us, and I will have questions for her too soon, because Hannah, she's one of the most outspoken women in Israel against surrogacy for many years.
Good.
She was the first. So there is a medical side, a very profitable one. I just saw that Ichilov Hospital in Israel, they're doing a convention about surrogacy with Tammuz, which is the company that did they did a surrogacy in India and Nepal, and I think now they're offering in US, Colombia. So they're entitled to their own business. Never mind, it doesn't matter what I think about it. Yeah. But why is Ichilov cooperating with them?
I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. So
I think I can answer the question about about Ichilov, about the Tel Aviv hospital, because it's a very easy one. The hospitals have an interest in promoting their doctors in the most they cannot promote the doctors too much because it's a public hospital. So what they do is that they let them, they take pride in what they're doing outside the hospital. And in that way, they give them sort of an acknowledgement of how good they are, how famous they are. They get a free, most of the public is very much pro surrogacy. Because the public thinks that, it's bringing children into the world. It's for people that, they cannot bring children into the world. So what do you want, you feminists? You're against families and all this kind of stuff. So it's a good publicity for the hospital.
And I think in the United States, if I can just add on to what you just said, that in the U.S. it's seen as, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to help people that would make wonderful parents and they can't have children? But then we also in the U.S. we have a very strong sense of a woman's right to do whatever she wants with her body. So if she wants to sell her eggs, if she wants to rent her wombs, if she wants to enter into a contract to do this with somebody else, who are we to stand in her way to do whatever she wants with? So we have those two kind of tensions, which it's really difficult to navigate when you're trying to stop a bad law or get a good law passed that stops surrogacy or stops egg selling. It's just very hard. And then they will always, because we, our work brings us to testify at hearings before lawmakers, and we will bring surrogates that have had horrible outcomes, almost lost their life, had their health ruined. We'll bring egg donors that will never be able to have their own children. We'll interview fathers whose wives died doing surrogacy. And then they will bring the agency, the fertility business, will bring the happy surrogates, the happy egg donors.
They always bring the happy surrogate, yeah. Here as
and
well.
it's a tension that you see in the prostitution debate, the happy hooker who wants to sell her body and sleep with 100 men. It's my body. So
I wanna say so. So it's a risky pregnancy, and I think it's also clear that not all the women do it only altruistically, but some kind of choice, even the choice to make money from my body. So like most people, I think, accept by now that the women also do it for the money, but they say it's still her choice. And I wanted to ask you, do really women become rich or even cover their expenses? Because this is something I think very interesting, because people say, okay, but they got like to buy a car or to buy a house. About the Indian surrogates, I remember people told me, this is so much money for them. They bought a house and the car and paid for the academic studies for all their children. And then a few years later came like the real pictures from surrogacy in Nepal and India, and they did not buy a house. So I wanted to hear, is it really like what happens after? But before, we have questions from Sigal and Shira. And Sigal asks, what are the rights of the customer's parents in case of a stillbirth, premature termination, or if the baby turns out not as healthy as expected? So
yeah, I think, that it's hard to answer that question, because in the United States and around the world, it really depends on what the law says. So like in California, where we live, before the surrogate is even pregnant, she signs legally away her what we call maternal rights. So before she's even pregnant, she's never acknowledged as having any rights to the child. She's not the mother. So when the baby is born, her name doesn't even go on the birth certificate, right? Because it goes to the customers or the parents. So in that scenario, the parents have all the rights. So if they know in advance this child is going to be born with, say, Down syndrome or disability, they can tell her she has to terminate the pregnancy, because they have the rights. Now, if the child is born and the child is born with some type of disability or some type of health problem, it's still their child, because their name's on the birth certificate, and they can decide to give the child up for adoption or to keep the child. Now, in other states in the United States,
is this something that happened? That the child was born with disabilities and the parents did not want him?
Yeah, it's happened. Yeah, in my film Breeders, one of the women surrogates gave birth to a child with a very rare genetic disability, and the parents wanted her to terminate the pregnancy, and she wouldn't. So she gave birth to this child, and then they took the child home. Now, the surrogate does not know, did they keep the child? Because they could have given the child up for adoption, but she doesn't know, because she didn't have any rights to know.
Yeah. And I saw in Ukraine a case like that the parents left a disabled child, and when it's something that you pay for in a distant country.
And that happened in Thailand with the baby Gammy case, the very famous baby Gammy case, who was born with Down syndrome. But it really depends. In some of our states in the United States, once the child is born, the surrogate baby is born, the surrogate mother is on the birth certificate as the birth mother, and then the parents have to go through a legal adoption.
When I tried to kind of do a research on surrogacy, so the fact that in the US nothing is registered, that the name of the parents straightly goes to the birth certificate. So there is a lot of data we can never get. Like when you did your study, how did you find the women?
We ran ads. We ran ads on Facebook, on Instagram, just generic ads. Researchers are looking to interview women who had been gestational carriers in the United States, gestational surrogates.
In Israel, it's much more like ordered. The health ministry has to approve like any surrogacy contract, and in the US, it's really like the parents' names goes on the birth certificate, and it's completely private.
Jennifer, many people, including my nephew, did surrogacy in the United States. And at least in the case of my nephew, which of course, it's one of the issues that puts us in a dilemma, because he knows and I know that I'm one of the more loud advocates against commercial surrogacy. In his case, the two kids were born from the same surrogate mom. She's from a very religious Christian group that the priest told them to bring more people of Israel into the world, which is a form of depressing women, which I was amazed seeing.
Yeah.
It was, and now they are in good relationship. It was pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know more about what you're doing there as feminist groups, feminist activists, in order to have more, to create more awareness to what's going on. So less and less women would do that.
Yeah, well, the sad reality in the United States is there's very few groups that are fighting to oppose surrogacy. Even when you look at the big feminist groups, National Organization for Women, they do not have a position on surrogacy or the selling of eggs, which I think is very sad. And we've had, I've had very private conversations with leaders of that group saying, how can you not take a position on this when it's clearly harmful to women's health? It's clearly exploitative. Planned Parenthood does not have a position on this. One of the largest, public provider of, care to women. So it's, and then we have, probably the same in Israel. We have the feminists that are very pro prostitution, pro sex work, pro it's your body, it's your choice, do whatever you want with it. So it's really hard because we don't have big organizations that either oppose it or will take a stand against it. So, we just continue to make documentary films. We continue to testify at legislative hearings when there's a new piece of legislation. We have a pretty good strategy across the United States is crazy because it's 50 states, which means everybody can do their own thing. Whereas Israel, you are governed by the federal law. We're governed by our state's law, so it keeps us very busy, and that's changing all the time. So we try to keep up legislatively at all 50 states. We're hoping that when our research is finally published, that will be helpful to be able to be used. We've had surrogates die in the United States. We've had surrogates die in California where we live. We've had 2 surrogates in California die fairly recently. I talk to people all the time and go, do you know surrogate mothers have died? And they're like, I didn't know that. Did you know surrogates are risky? Surrogates? No, I didn't know that. So, we just are trying to inform as many people, which is why we're Zoom calling now with people in Israel. Last week before the new year, we were on a Zoom call with people in Germany because Germany's trying to legalize altruistic surrogacy because, their federal law is very strict against surrogacy and egg selling. They have, groups that are trying to legalize that. So, we have our hands full. We're busy. So we're happy to meet people in Israel that perhaps want to make sure that surrogacy remains illegal in your country.
As far as we're concerned, I think that the situation with the women organization is the same. Mm-hmm. The women organization are carry very mild approach to all the important feminist issues, whether it's surrogacy or prostitution or anything else. They are being fed by the government with budgets in some cases,
I think,
and they cannot go against the government boldly. So they're really no help, no use. These are not feminist organizations; these are women organizations. And I think that's
Hannah, regarding surrogacy, and they see she also opened her screen, and she published the same. I wanted to talk about a campaign that just runs in Israel. It's a lawsuit by a surrogacy agency against former surrogates, which is very surprising, because you would think that maybe they will sue for medical damage, but it's the opposite. But I want to say that there is very little knowledge. I think actually that if people actually knew about all these cases, they would be more against it. And what I found out in the US, like regarding all these like death cases or women losing their wombs, women unable to walk, many like damages women face. There is no one tracking that. Like what Jennifer or what I find is just like women come to her, and to me, I just have many weird friends. And in many cases, even when there is information or women speak, the agencies try to silence them. And I have to say that it's not only the agencies. I saw some very like bad behavior from couples themselves.
I think that gets back to we need a massive educational campaign. When we produce a new documentary and we do a screening in pre-COVID, when we would screen movies in movie houses and theaters, we would do a survey before we showed the film. We would ask 5 little questions, simple questions. What do you know about egg donation? Do you think egg donation is a good thing? Simple like that. Then we showed the film, Eggsploitation. We asked them the same questions. In watching a 50-minute film, 97% of the audience changed their position. I didn't know it was dangerous. I didn't know it was harmful. I'm against this. So it's just because people don't have the information. We would love it if people in Israel wanted to translate our scripts into your language and subtitle our films on surrogacy. And you can just put them out there on YouTube and let people watch it, and people go, I didn't know that this was risky. I didn't know women bonded with their children. I didn't know that they had these kind of complications.
Hebrew.
If it's okay, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the recruitment of women to be surrogates, because I don't know how. One of the things that I was thinking that was problematic when they approved gay surrogacy in Israel is the fact that now surrogacy gonna be in much high demand than it was in Israel. So I was thinking where all these surrogates are gonna come from.
Yeah, in the United States, it's this heavily advertisement. They're on every kind of social media, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Instagram, whether it be Facebook, Twitter. I mean, Shulamit follows a lot of these sites, so that's how she sends me stories that she sees. So a lot of it's just, university campuses. In the United States, military wives are a target for surrogates. So, military wives have their own sort of newspapers. So they see the advertisements, and the advertisements are all help somebody, be an angel, make money. It's all glamorous. You're doing this wonderful thing. A lot of surrogates and egg donors go on when they get too old to be surrogates or egg donors anymore. They go on to work for the agencies as the recruiters.
The connection. I even saw that affiliation programs. I will show one agency. Yeah, you see. So the money is apparent. In Israel, it's like a set sum, but it's very apparent, like that you get money, and a lot of like inspirational, like kind of commercials, and it's targeted. It won't appear to you. It will appear if you're the right age and the right profile and live in the right country. I started to get them just because I searched for them.
I wanted to know if you differentiate between cases of surrogacy between, let's say, 2 friends or people that know each other, as opposed to surrogacy that the agent brings together the two people. And I'll say I have two hats. My professional hat is I run a foundation for women's health in Israel. And personally, you met my two girls beforehand. This guy is adopted, and my second daughter is from surrogacy with a friend of mine who approached me and knew that I was feminist and probably would say no, and convinced me that she wanted to be a surrogate. And we went through the process together. And till this day, she's feminist and pro surrogacy. And I wanted to know if you differentiate between things like that when it's a close relation.
Yeah, no, we don't differentiate because, you're one of the lucky, happy stories where it worked out. I always tell people the surrogate pregnancy is risky whether you're helping a stranger or you're helping a friend. These high risks of preeclampsia, maternal hypertension, bonding. Those don't go away because you're helping a friend. One of the surrogates in California that died, it was her second surrogacy for the same couple. So the first surrogacy went great. It was all wonderful. They were this nice blended family. They got together on birthdays, and they were ready for a second child. They came back and said, we want a sibling now. And so she said, I'd be happy to help you. And she died. So they're good friends. And they know that this man lost his wife. She was the mother of two small children. They lost their mom. I interviewed this father recently that his wife died of surrogacy. And he said that the intended mother and intended father are in counseling because they're just so overwhelmed with the fact that this woman died helping them have a baby, and they were all very friendly, got together, enjoyed each other's company. So none of those risks go away. Because you're helping a friend, and those risks don't go away if you're doing it for free or for money.
I wasn't saying it because of there's a difference in the risks, obviously. Yeah. But okay, I'll ask another question.
Okay.
As was mentioned, all the cases of surrogacy are approved by the government, each case. And there's so it's not in the same quantities as in the States, smaller numbers, and there's a very big group of surrogates. I don't see any one of them here today. Women who are surrogates, I'm very involved with them, also the case of what Shulamit mentioned, that they're being sued, but in a lot of ways. And these are all women who have been surrogates. And you mentioned that women say, well, this is my choice. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't quite understand your answer. Like, are you saying that they should not have that choice at all? That they made a choice that wasn't really a choice that should be allowed to be made? Because one of the things that we're trying to change is, I'm a strong believer in nothing about us without us.
Nothing what?
Nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
I think that every conversation about surrogacy should include surrogates in the conversation. And one of the things that they are very much against is they feel that when there is debate, nobody asks for their opinion. People just assume that they didn't really decide, they didn't have a choice, they were exploited.
I think that I'm also completely against it, and I'm young and feminist, and it's kind of weird for people because women my age are usually like for it. But I think for myself, I don't see them as exploited. Like, I also have a friend of a friend that has been a surrogate. I don't see each specific woman as exploited or not making her own choice. For me, I just read that in states where there's more altruistic surrogacy, there is more commercial surrogacy. So for me, this is why I'm against it. Not because all the women are exploited, but because like the direction it goes. And Jennifer.
Well, the context, you have two questions there, so I'll address both of them. But first I'll address the, no discussion without us point. In the United States, that's not the reality. So like, for example, when we show up to testify at any kind of debate as far as a law, there's always surrogates in favor of this speaking their experience, as well as surrogates who are speaking how it was harmful to them. So, and in the United States, when our media ever reports on a celebrity pregnancy, it's always very pro-surrogacy. So if anything, the U.S. allows way more of those voices that are in support of this choice, this right to do this. So we are always battling for just a little bit of, can we have our voice? Now, your second one is, you asked me, do you think the women should not have this choice? Absolutely, I think they should not have this choice. Just like there's so many choices we don't have. I don't have the choice to sell my organs in the United States. It's illegal for me to do that. I can give my organs away, but I can't say, it's my kidney, I want to sell it to somebody who's willing to pay me $25,000. It's my choice. I don't have that. I don't have the choice to get behind a car and drive drunk, even though I want to choose to do that. I don't think doctors have any right in their ethical medical practice to ask a woman to choose to do something that she doesn't medically need to do. Like, we medically take choices all the time. You have breast cancer. The doctor says you need to take chemotherapy. This has all this risk. It can kill you. It can harm you. But you make the choice to take those risks because you have cancer. A surrogate has no reason to assume medical risk to her health, when there's no medical need.
Say that also artificial fertility when someone's the mother. Like, infertility, is that a disease or not? You could say the same thing.
Yeah,
Should someone be allowed to go through IVF just because they don't have children?
And that is that could be a whole separate discussion when you're looking at a woman who has an underlying fertility problem. Is that an illness, a disease? And I would argue for, less is better approach medically, find out why this couple can't conceive, can we do some low dose kind of hormone? Is it the woman's having trouble with ovulation? Does she have endometriosis? Maybe some laparoscopy surgery. Does she have blocked fallopian tubes? All that kind of medical model, because there is an underlying, illness or disease in this.
You just said a lot of words that I think half of us did not understand, at least.
Oh.
And I see myself as someone who knows about women's medicine. I want to also take a question from Michal.
Thank you. I have to leave. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sarah, for your voice and important questions. Michal.
Yeah, earlier you talked about targeting women, and you showed us the Facebook, and this is how I got into this business. I was 21-year-old broke student in New York, and all of a sudden I see on my Facebook, Jewish women, are needed for eggs, because specifically in the US, not a lot of Jews. So if you're Jewish, you can make even more for your eggs. So this is how they kind of get to you. And then even though in Israel you think it's screened and there's some kind of regulation, I told Shulamit, I found out a few years ago there was a social worker who started an agency, and she started looking for women with low income on Facebook. And I approached the ethic committee of the Misrad HaBriyut, of the health ministry in Israel, and they were like, yeah, well, it's legal. It's screened. This is what we do in Israel. So there's nothing we can do about it. And this is clearly, there's a ethical issue there, because they're social workers. What I wanted to ask you is about, because we didn't really talk about the kids so much. And as I kind of read and watch your films and other films, I'm really interested in, because I've found out there's a whole community now of, they call themselves donor conceived people, whether it's surrogacy or donations, selling. So some of them don't even like the word donation.
I'll give another plug to Callie's Venus Rising podcast, because she's had quite a few donor conceived people as guests on that. And I think she has a woman who was donor conceived coming up in the new year on one of the episodes. The woman who had to leave, we have to listen to their voices. We can't talk about helping people have babies and not talk to the now grown up babies, that we're part of this conversation of us deciding who gets to have babies and how people get to have babies and make babies. And it's clear that they are very organized, and that's the beauty and power of social media. So there's, very robust donor conception group in Australia that actually lobbied and changed the law that made anonymous sperm donation, egg donation go away, because they say we have a right to know, just like children who were perhaps born of adoption have argued in the United States for the right to have access to their original birth certificate, to know how they came to be on the planet.
I think we're about to finish soon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting because these people are now very young, but in a few years it will be very interesting to hear what they have to say about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Could I have a small word about exploiting women? I'm being attacked even in the social media by women that say that I'm a privileged woman that gave birth to her own children, and I don't know what it is. And women are not exploited. And I say again and again, they are. Even if they want to bear children for somebody else, it's very gender-oriented because it's something that is being asked from women because of their social genderial position of being women. I do think that the choice to carry a baby for somebody else, it's not a choice. And I say it again and again for many years, for 20 years already. I think even more. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
For all the years you talked about it, I also don't completely agree. Not with you and not with you, and I guess not with anyone here completely, but definitely since you spoke about it, it gave me the kind of courage to start to. And yeah, you get attacked. I think all the women who try to write about it get attacked. And I definitely think that we need to write more about all the things we mentioned. And thank you, Jennifer and Callie, and everyone who joined us today.